FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz. Today's 10-10-17. Is this the most scary moment of our lives? The riskiest moment of our lives? Well, recently Danielle Park on her blog jugglingdynamite.com quoted Richard H. Thaler, a U of Chicago professor, Nobel Prize laureate, who says we seem to be living in the riskiest moment of our lives, and yet the stock market seems to be napping. Well, Danielle is never napping. Danielle, welcome back. And first, the emails, kl@kerrylutz.com. So, Danielle, that's a pretty strong admonition from somebody who actually might know something.
Well, he's an expert on behavioral finance, right? He was one of the founders of that discipline, and he's just pointing out that it is the most complacent, low yield, overvalued, overbought financial markets, financial assets ever in history, ever in human history. There's been no period like this where we've had this extreme valuations in every asset class with the least volatility moves, months and months and months of not even a 1%, downturn. And yet every investor, but this actually coincides with other market tops where you have the lowest fear and complacency, where every bear that ever was has given up and gone home, and all you have left are the one side of the trade, which is the long side of the trade. And even if you look at the pension funds and how they've coped with this extraordinarily low yield environment the past few years, what they've done is they have migrated a larger and larger portion of their assets to alternatives, right? That nebulous class of things that don't trade in normal markets. So you've got, whether it's private equity or hedge funds or, all sorts of different securities and business types, but they're highly illiquid, a lot of real estate based stuff, highly illiquid. And what they've done is they've migrated up to 40% of the portfolios into this really highly illiquid stuff, hoping to make better yield there than they can find in the general marketplace or in general assets. But the other portion of the money that they need to provide income for the payouts, match liabilities for all the promises, what have they done, Kerry? They've plowed that into ETF, index, passive, check your brain at the door, buy constantly whenever new cash flow comes in. And the big problem that's happening now is that, and this is, I think, what Thaler's alluding to, anybody that knows anything about how this stuff works realizes that when a liquidity crunch hits, everybody looks to sell whatever they can. And you're not going to be able to dump the highly illiquid private equity locked in for months at a time stuff. So what you're going to have to do is raise cash through the ETF indexes, passive, all the FANG stocks, the things that everyone's up to the eyebrows in that are long in this marketplace. And, that's where I think the real carnage sets in. You think you're in a buy and hold environment. You're not. When people have been pushed to park all their cash into ETFs and indexes as a cash park, because, everybody knows it only goes up and it's very low volatility and all that garbage that people have adopted. Yeah. Well, housing was always illiquid though. There's friction costs and all that. People have convinced themselves that the S&P 500 is a cash equivalent here. And that is a dangerous, dangerous thing because it is the most overvalued equity market in the world today. And it has been directly correlated with, of course, the QE purchases. And the other big thing, which I also was writing about, of course, on the blog, is these buybacks, more than $7 trillion now has gone into share buybacks just in the last, say, 14 years of these crazy market cycles. And this all goes back to 1982 when they revised the laws and allowed corporations to purchase their own shares again. And it was considered illegal stock manipulation up until then. So what we've had is that, the QEs of the world, the interventions, the financialization, all that coupled with corporations paying their executives through bonuses of equity-based compensation. And so all the chips have just gone to how do we make this sucker go up? How do we make it go up, regardless of what's best for the business or the balance sheet or the long-term sustainability or employees, God forbid. There's nothing at all to do with, how to pay people reasonable compensation. It's all about how do we put, all the chips on this one group of people to get them exquisitely enriched, and everything else is really atrophied.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, the whole concept of the buyback, you can have companies in theory that have a poor capital structure and you need to do something. They can have too many shares out. But the proper way to do it is with reverse splits or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Once you go buying it back, that's an admission on management's part that we got all this cash or the ability to borrow, and we can't figure out how to make any money on it. And to me, that should be grounds to get rid of them, because they've pretty much conceded that they don't know how to grow the company.
Right. But perverse as this system is, the absolute opposite occurs. Even if the management gets thrown out, they are very confident in the fact that they have a big balloon payment coming, and it's all to do with the equity, again, of the shares, the price of the shares. That's how they cash out. So it's a very perverse system. That's why Thaler, that's why Schiller, that's why anyone, Schilling, that's why anyone that's Park, that's been around for a few decades here, says, this isn't right, guys. Like, this is a mess. It's going to blow in a spectacular fashion. The people that are going to be hurt are the ones who have made promises for payouts, or who are banking on, being able to afford to retire, for example, or meet their other financial goals. I mean, financial planning has become, financial planning is critical to long-term success, but it's become a buzzword for how do we sell you junk and take your cash. And I find that, everybody's now on the bandwagon with trying to convince people there's a magic solution to their financial challenges when, build up savings, keep it safe and liquid, take very limited risk, work long as you can, to be productive instead of having to live off your savings. Those are all the real truths of the matter, but most people don't, I guess, like those ideas, or they're too broke to save. And there's lots, back to why there's such extreme polarity in income in the economy. People have both bought the selling of products, financial debts, all this stuff that the banks have grown rich on. They've bought all that consumption culture, which has left them broke. And at the same time, they've doubled down on risky assets as if that's going to make the day. And the two are quite toxic. The two are literally, undermining the entire health and strength of the system today. And it's a very dark time. So when Thaler says, hey, I think this is probably the scariest time that we've, lived through. And he's speaking both in his probably 6 decades, but just in modern history.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah. The financial engineering, I think, is going to come to an abrupt and very ignominious end. And we're going to be remembering it just like you and I study the history of the Great Depression, because you want to learn something from it. I mean, the Pecora Commission, all of the hearings that were done in Congress after the crash of 29, and as well as personal relatives and friends recounting of those events. And yet, all these years later, Danielle, we're talking, it's how many years? It's 88 years later, which probably is a numerological sign that something is going to hit the fan, right? All these years later, and what the heck have we learned from it at all? Have we learned anything?
Well, some of us have, but no, the policy and the people calling the shots are still fully in the very same traditions of that era. Peter Bernstein wrote so many great books, and I miss people like him on the planet, because he was one of those people that lived, not just studied it, lived it. He was literally in the money management business after the Second World War, came back. His dad had that money management company, and he wrote many books about the experience of coming back into a secular boom from, having no experiences as an investor or as a professional investor, living through that boom phase when everything went up, all the way into the like basically 1960s, late 1960s, about the year I was born in 65 was the peak of that secular bull cycle.
Right.
And then, all hell broke loose. And then people just kept getting hammered and losing. In 73, 74, two back-to-back bear markets. And he writes in, I think it's Capital Ideas, he tells the story of that experience. And he says the problem with the smooth sailing of the secular bull was that no one knew anything by the end of it. You were just so confident, so risk exposed, so complacent, so just toss it in, so irreverent with capital and safety. They were all about just throw it in, and obviously the stock market only goes up, just as as we've seen in real estate peaks. Who cares? Toss it in. The price is only going up. That kind of mentality. And he says there was a period after that where everyone had lost so much money, and it was just the gaping holes in balance sheets and pensions and everywhere he looked. And he said the overwhelming sense was, what have we done? Like, what have we done? And I think we're coming to that moment where the people that have been so sure or confident or fooled themselves into believing they were actually adding value are going to have to face the demons and say, what have we done here? And it's going to be hard to fix. 66 to 82, it took, 17 years of grinding around and 3 big bear drops in order to finally clean the system out and get to that point in 82. That's how they got into the rules about don't buy back shares again, and put the finance executives back in a box and persecuted many for crimes. People went to jail, all that. That was what finally cleaned the system out, so that by 82 we had another big secular setup for a extended period of prosperity. And unfortunately now we're right still at the top of that journey down, I would say.
Hey, and it happened again in the 70s too with the Nifty 50. Those are those so-called one decision stocks. You buy Kodak, you buy Xerox, you buy IBM, and you buy and hold them for life. You'll never have to make another decision. One decision stocks, just buy. And I think you should write a book, and I'm going to give you the title for it, Danielle. I think you're going to like it. ABB. Always be buying, right? Isn't that Wall Street's credo? Doesn't matter if the world's coming to an end, if we were about to, whatever was going to happen, an asteroid was going to hit the planet, like I think it was that movie Armageddon, one of those movies, end of the world movies. They'd still be telling you to buy because the stocks are always going to go up, right?
Yeah, it's like living with crazy people. And the thing is, it's another person likened it to being a radiologist who knows how to read x-rays. And you look at an x-ray and you see like huge metastases inside of a person. And you say to them, I'm sorry, this is your x-ray. It's full of cancer. And they say, well, that's wrong, obviously, because I feel great. So that's the equivalent of where we are today. I know how to take measurements, and I've got all this context and historical perspective, and I'm looking at things going, okay, this is all wrong. This is all a nightmare. Take cover. And people will say, well, you're wrong because it's up and it's up some more, and it could go up some more. And then someone else said to me, what if it goes up a lot more? And I said, well, then it'll be even a lot more hideous, lacking in value. Yields will be even lower. The system will have even bigger deficits, and the blow up will be that much more extreme. So, you really can't, pump your way out of this mess. You have to let mean reversion, creative destruction, cleansing, put some sense back in it so that people with sober capital see business opportunities, not just speculative, flipping about things, but business opportunities that make sense because the valuations are attractive and, yields are going to be able to pay people a decent income again, so they don't have to be consuming their capital just to live. I mean, it's such a dark time.
Well,
do you know Jan Arden? She's a Canadian artist, but she's quite famous. She has a song called The Devil Won. And I saw her in concert a couple of weekends ago, and she was singing The Devil Won. And I thought, not yet. But it has felt like the devil's been winning here for a long time.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, Danielle, you're just going to continue to be wrong until you're right. And it's kind of like Nassim Taleb, Black Swan. That guy has made zillions of dollars just taking these absurd, outrageous bets because he's saying, like, the bell curve doesn't apply. We're going to have outliers and, basically there's going to be crashes, and just betting the crashes, keep betting and betting and betting, because eventually he's going to be right. I don't want to say that you're part of the stopped clock phenomena, because I've been accused of that myself. It's not that. It's just it's a behavioral issue, a mania that sets into these markets, and all of the things that should be warning you against it, that should be telling you to put the brakes on, are actually have been perverted and turned around, and instead are encouraging you to double down, keep doubling down, keep your money in there. Don't take profits. Just reinvest your profits, because it's just going to keep going up and up. And
take even more opioids. Go for it.
Right. So
yeah. I've said this before too, but it is true, because I've been in this business a long time, and you can be wrong in a couple of different ways. And I've learned through my life that the only really bad way to be wrong is to lose a ton of money. If you're down by half and you're still arguing that you were right, you were wrong. That's just the way it is, But if you miss out on some of the upside, I don't see that as the same wrong as someone who, let someone get wiped out. Because once they're wiped out, then, all sorts of terrible things knock off from there. The upside, if you miss out on some of the upside, that's not the same type of being wrong. That's a very adult perspective, because that's what your choices are. Your choices are, you either have to sell before it goes down again, or you sell likely at the bottom, which is what most people do. There's Thaler's behavioral science work again.
I've done it.
And that's what they do, right?
I've definitely done it. Yeah.
And it's because for not irrational reasons, humans typically aren't well financially managed. So this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. The bulk of financial management is about controlling debt, paying it off, building up cash savings, living within your means, not having too much overhead. That's really the most important part of financial management. But we have an industry that only comes at it, doesn't look at the foundation at all, just comes in and starts describing what sort of paint you should put on the walls, as long as you can buy the paint from them. They're all about selling you the paint, and no one's looking at the foundation. So when these storms hit, they wipe people out because they weren't well positioned from the beginning. It's not that the market cycle has to be the end of your existence, but it's the leverage and exposure you've put yourself in, and what is your liquidity? What is the safe stuff you'll rely on when the longer term asset stuff declines in value? And that's why this has been such a heinous period, because all the low yield environment, the long cycle, the longer they've extended this upturn with the QE buying, they've pushed more and more people out of the safe havens where they ought to be, out of the cashable government-based deposits and all that, stuff that's ideally suited for people who need income and stability, and pushed them out into the really sketchy stuff. And that's why this is going to be such a painful reckoning.
Yeah, well, it's just a good thing that in Lower Manhattan now, Danielle, not that Wall Street really exists. Wall Street is a computer screen. It's not really a physical locale, but at least in those buildings, a long time ago, they upgraded them so the windows don't open, so there'll be less people who are able to jump out.
Nice. Yeah.
Right?
Well, yeah. And I'm also, it's not those people that I'm really worried about. I feel like many of those people get what they deserve in the end. It's the people who are taking advice from those people and not aware of their exposure and downside. That's the people that I find I'm most concerned about.
Yeah, well, it's a big deal. And it's going to be a lot of shared misery. And the one good thing that will come out of it is that if it's a good thing, is that at least finally we'll be starting to seriously look at definancialization of the economy and actually putting the financial sector back to what it should have been doing, which was allocating
a utility.
Yeah.
A utility in support of prosperity instead of an extractive, parasite.
Right. Speaking of which, I just want to segue a little bit into another topic, because when you said public utility and extractive, what went into my mind was Google, Facebook, Twitter, all of these, huge social media empires that now they just do whatever the heck they want, and there's no control. They censor views, whether they like them or not, who knows, but they're really starting to censor. You think these guys should be considered a public utility, Danielle?
Well, I think that certainly the internet is a public utility. Certainly the infrastructure there that allows us all to conduct business and interaction. It's become every system, really. It's integrated everything together. So I think we have a lot of public interest in, keeping the rules of the road to whatever extent possible, and trying to serve a public interest in the management of that utility. The services that steal information or take information and sell it for profit and to the harm of their customer, I think that is a major problem. And we're running to catch up all the time, Carrie. We're running to catch up with autonomous vehicle laws and how we can use these cars on the road. We're running to catch up with this whole information technology. So it's going to take a long time, and by then everything will have changed again. But I definitely think there's crimes being committed, and there's predatory business practices that need to be curbed. And we have to just work away every day, just keep trying to put some sanity back in the system.
Oh, God. Yeah, you're so right. These companies do your viewing habits, your email, all of this stuff. They know everything about you. They're tracking you through your own computer, whether you've consented to it or not. It's iffy, it's murky. And then they go and sell it off and make billions of dollars. And then you got, I just want to cover one more thing, the Equifax disaster, because that hit you guys too. I mean, it really has hit the whole world, the whole Western world. I mean, you can't even imagine. I had been dealing with Equifax. Well, so I've been out of that business 10 years, 25, 30 years I was dealing with them. And there are so many services that they offer that they haven't even told the public about. If you apply for a life insurance policy, guess who does the checkup on you to make sure that you're of sound character?
Equifax.
That's one of their services. If you apply for a mortgage, because of what Dodd-Frank has done and all that, the banks have outsourced more and more of the background underwriting to the credit bureaus. Auto loans, everything else, but so much more than just credit reports. And then the company gets breached, and if you had responsible management, which I guess is a big if elephants could fly, the first thing they do is alert the public to the fact that their data's been stolen. But no, these ne'er-do-wells, these malevolent souls, have just gone and sold stock. I mean, it's really reprehensible. And outrage, every single person should be outraged in North and South America and big parts of Europe and Asia as well. I mean, one of their systems, I think it was in Argentina, Danielle, the username was admin. And guess what the password was to get on the system?
What?
Admin. All right. And that gave you the keys to the mansion. I think it was Argentina. Goodness. And that's the kind of people that they get our data. We have nothing to say about it. If you charge a credit card on your, whatever you guys up in Canada have, your Visa, MasterCard, Amex, and all the other cards you have, it all goes to them. Like not the charge, but the status, your monthly status of your account, whether you're paying or not, what you owe.
Yeah, well, this story really encapsulates all the themes we've talked about today. It's the financialization aspect, the executives getting their compensation through shares, their realization that we're in the midst of a massive asset bubble, and any bad news that finally hits has the potential to, cavitate stock prices. So you cash out. If cash is so useless, how come that's where everyone runs as soon as they want to preserve principal, right? And then the abuses on, our trust in the powers that be that are supposed to be doing their job as the police or the gatekeepers, and they're so lackadaisical and, lazy that they are not even putting appropriate passwords. I mean, so this again, long cycles, extended prosperity or enrichment of a particular group tends to make them complacent and stop doing their job. And that's where the problems and that's where the opportunities come too. That's where this opportunity will lie for those who can get from here to there without getting wiped out.
Yeah,
is if you can keep some principle, you can keep some liquidity and keep your wits about you. If this is the greatest risk right now, as Thaler would suggest, it's also got to be setting us up for one of the best opportunities of our lifetime and longer.
Yeah, well, to go back on the old cliche of the Chinese symbol for crisis is danger. One's danger, the other's opportunity, but everybody knows that. Anyway, visit Danielle's site, jugglingdynamite.com. Email us, kl@kerrylutz.com. Twitter feeds @KerryLutz. The Facebook page, one of those lovely companies, is Financial Survival Network. We'll catch up with you in a couple weeks, Danielle.
Thanks, Kerry.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.